People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times.
Sinks, showers, and toilets. We won't talk about toilets. Trump with the toilets.
People have to flush their toilet 15 times.
Toilets 10 times, right? 10 times. Wow, Bob, not me, of course, not me.
While President Trump was in office, staff in the White House residence periodically discovered wads of printed paper clogging a toilet in the White House residence. Most believe the president had been flushing documents.
Keep your eyes open if you see any shenanigans, which you probably will. If you see people like dumping things, flushing things.
For the Watergate scandal, where, of course, then President Richard Nixon was reluctant to hand over his secret Oval Office recordings. And then when he did, he was ordered by the Supreme Court to do so. There were 18 minutes of tape missing. And that was from a conversation just 3 days after the break-in at Watergate. Nixon tried to blame his secretary for the mistake, but the seemingly flagrant attempt to cover it up was ultimately what led to Nixon's downfall. We also saw a kind of bizarre reversal of the cliche during Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign for president, where Clinton was accused of a cover-up using a private email server and allegedly destroying communications, an accusation that became a refrain at Trump's rallies. But the thing was that the underlying crime that she was supposedly covering up was never really substantiated and barely even alleged. It was just sort of this vague implication of wrongdoing. But during the campaigns and presidency of Donald Trump, things were different, of course. Trump's brazen lawlessness happened out in the open, which bizarrely worked as a kind of excuse or justification, as if the brazenness itself is its own form of scandal insulation. I mean, think about Trump's infamous Russia, if you're listening moment during the summer of 2016, when he just called on a foreign adversary to illegally hack Hillary Clinton's emails. That happened during a live press conference in Florida. And back in September 2019, it was the White House itself that released the notes from the so-called perfect phone call with the Ukrainian president, where Trump pressured him to dig up dirt on the Bidens, leading to the former president's first impeachment. And when Trump realized the transcript might not be so perfect after all, his defense was to do the same thing again, only this time in public.
Mr. President, what exactly did you hope Zelensky would do about the Bidens after your phone call? Exactly.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
Because again, you see what he's doing there, right? He had kind of been caught in this phone call doing something untoward. And his first instinct was to reverse engineer a kind of brazenness about it by going in front of the cameras and then doing the crimes in public. It's like when he pressured Mike Pence to help commit a coup on Twitter. And when that was doomed to fail, he riled up an angry mob and sent them to storm the Capitol. Again, all on camera. But as we've learned over the years, and as we're learning more now, not all of Trump's malfeasance was committed out in the open. As it turns out, there were apparently many cover-ups. Like when Trump instructed his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, to pitch the Department of Homeland Security on the federal government seizing the voting machines as part of an attempt to steal the election. Sending Giuliani, of course, kept his hands clean. And in fact, Politico just published emails indicating that Giuliani, along with disgraced former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, were also working with others behind the scenes on a clandestine plot to seize the voting machines, including drafting a potential executive order. Again, that stuff wasn't being done out in public. It's lucky we even have those records at all, because every day we are also learning more about the efforts that Trump and his team took to destroy evidence. About as clear an example of a cover-up as you could hope to get. It all started with Trump's much reported habit of ripping up documents, which would be a clear and flagrant violation of the Presidential Records Act. We now know that many of the records received by the National Archives reportedly arrived shredded, had to be taped back together, and that is if they arrived at all, because some records were apparently destroyed completely, directed into so-called burn bags, which is just a flagrant violation of the act. Others were reportedly hidden away at the ex-president's private residence in Florida, including, it turns out, those were marked classified, including some marked top secret, according to the Washington Post. Top secret, of course, is just, written across the top. It looks a lot like it does in the movies. We now know the National Archives has asked the Department of Justice to investigate these practices. But today, we learned about another way that the ex-president was apparently destroying documents. And it might actually answer one of the long-standing mysteries of the Trump administration. It's one that I thought about probably more than I should have. Because, you see, during many of his campaign-style rallies, Donald Trump, always a showman at heart, would sometimes practice what can only be described as his stand-up routine. He had material, and he'd go to it again and again. And the motivation behind his shtick was usually pretty obvious. For instance, he used to riff that wind turbines cause cancer, which they did not, because he was feuding with a wind farm he thought ruined the views of his golf course in Scotland. There was one particular riff that never really made much sense. And it was a riff about environmentally friendly showers and toilets that use less water. The crowd absolutely loved it. He went back to it again and again. Just listen.
So, I hate to say the three things. It's the shower, it's the sink, and the third element in the bathroom. But I don't say it, because every time I say it, they only talk about that one. Because it's sort of gross to talk about, right? So I won't talk about the fact that people have to flush their toilet 15 times. Okay? I will not talk about it.
Sinks, right? Showers. And what goes with a sink and a shower? 10 times, right? 10 times. Wow, Bob, not me, of course, not me.
People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times, as opposed to once.
We won't talk about toilets, but that's 10, 15, but we don't talk about that. Because I've said this 3 or 4 times, the only subject they ever talk about is toilets.
Okay, first of all, credit where due, it is a funny bit. Second of all, they're flushing toilets 10, 15 times, okay? Not 3 times, not 4 times, 10 or 15 times. I mean, you look at it, you think is the guy well? Is there something going on? Should he be going to Walter Reed to get that checked out? What is he talking about? No one could figure out what Trump was talking about. 15 times? Well, today we might have an answer. According to a new nugget from New York Times' Maggie Haberman's upcoming book, which comes out actually in the fall, while President Trump was in office, staff in the White House residence periodically discovered wads of printed paper clogging a toilet and believed the president had flushed pieces of paper. At least according to this report, staff believed that the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump, was personally flushing documents down the toilet, ripping them up, flushing them down the toilet. At the very least, 10 to 15 flushes starts to make some sense. I mean, I've never disposed of documents that way, but I can imagine, particularly with those efficient toilets, it could be a while. Oh, we should note that Trump has denied the allegations for what that's worth. Writing one of the statements, he's forced release now because he's banned from Twitter, quote, "Another fake story that I flushed papers and documents down a White House toilet is categorically untrue and simply made up by a reporter in order to get publicity for a mostly fictitious book." But it's been widely reported that Trump has a habit of destroying documents, ripping them up, apparently designating them for burn bags, maybe perhaps even flushing them. And I think it's true, the lesson he learned is never leave anything in writing. And there's always, again, to go back to the brazenness, right? There's always this kind of exculpatory air that hangs over him because he's so clearly such a moral idiot who doesn't know what's right and what's wrong, that there's something exculpatory about the fact that he ripped everything up. That was their spin. Oh, it's just habit. He's like a paper ripper. But flushing records down the toilet? Do that out of habit? Just absentmindedly there 15 times? Or even destroying them? Okay, that's just flagrantly unlawful in a way that people in the White House should understand. Trump apparently thought he could flush away the evidence. And the guilty conscience embedded that implies is so incredibly telling. 2016, when Donald Trump was on the campaign trail, he had this ridiculous riff about his then opponent, Hillary Clinton, which persisted even after he got into the White House. He basically accused her campaign of rampant criminality over her private email server, things that were utterly untrue, but that did not stop him.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. People who have nothing to hide don't smash phones with hammers. They don't.
People who have nothing to hide don't bleach. Nobody's ever heard of it. Don't bleach their emails or destroy evidence to keep it from being publicly archived as required under federal law.
And the thing that you should be apologizing for are the 33,000 emails that you deleted and that you acid washed. And then the 2 boxes of emails and other things last week that were taken from an office and are now missing. Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone.
Again, that was all largely false. I mean, there were personal emails that Clinton did say that she deleted that were personal, but the FBI director came out and announced there was no criminal wrongdoing on the part of Hillary Clinton or her campaign. On the other hand, we are now learning more about the potential criminality of Donald Trump and his White House. Just this week, we got reporting on boxes of documents improperly taken to Mar-a-Lago, which may have included classified documents, some that were even marked as top secret. We got reporting on documents put in bags to be burned and documents shredded and taped back together, and documents that were reportedly flushed down the toilet by Trump himself, or at least that's what the staff in the White House thought when they encountered it in the toilet. Yes, there's a spectrum of diligence or sloppiness, and then there's the willful, consistent destruction of documents. I'm not a lawyer, but what Trump did sure feels definitionally in that latter category. Fortunately, we do have a lawyer here tonight, George Conway, who has been following developments from the Trump White House for years, along with Josh Marshall, founder and editor of Talking Points Memo. His latest column, which is very good, is called, once again, Trump's Defense is the Brazenness of His Crimes, and both join me now. George, I think you can probably attest to this. I was just saying in the last block about how seriously White Houses tend to take this stuff. They tend to be stuff full of lawyers. Lawyers take compliance very seriously. People are very, very, real kind of dotting the I, crossing T's on these presidential records. As a lawyer, what's your conclusion when you look at this constellation of facts that we're learning now?
Well, it just shows a remarkable disregard and basically a contempt for the rules that apply to everyone else. And that's a hallmark of Donald Trump. The rules shouldn't apply to him. They don't apply to him. If they are applied to him, it's unfair and grossly, it's a political attack, but the rules should always apply to someone else and they should lock her up. And that's just classic Donald Trump. Now, to go to the particular issues here, I think the point you raised earlier and the point that Ashley raised earlier about intent is an important one. But it's important to remember that the kind of intent that's required here to show a criminal violation isn't the same kind of intent that's required to show obstruction of justice, where you actually have to show that the documents, if you destroy them, are material to an investigation. Here, you just have to show that there was an intentional, willful destruction of documents that were required to be retained because they were in the files of the government. And you have to show basically that he didn't rip them up or he didn't flush them accidentally. On the other hand, you do have to show, well, what was it that he was doing and what were these documents? What was the document in the toilet? God help anyone who had to go fish that out. On the other hand, you see I kind of feel for the guy, right? He doesn't like. No wonder why he doesn't like toilets. Imagine, it's probably an offshoot of the windmill thing, where he tried to shred a document using a windmill once. It didn't work out so well. So I don't know.
That's how it works its way into his bit. I mean, Josh, you said this point in the column you wrote about, like, again, this is in Maggie Haberman's book. It's coming out in the fall. There is another reporter who popped up today to say she had heard the same thing from staff, again, in the residence. So I can't stipulate this is absolutely true, but there's some reason to believe it is. You had this phrase, definitionally willful, right? Like this sort of blanket excuse for his behavior always, which is that, like, everything he does, it's like you have to understand the guy is such a sociopath. He's such a weirdo. He's so morally blind. He doesn't understand what he's doing. You can't say that about ripping something up and flushing it down the toilet.
Well, look, it comes back to, it's that basic thing that we've seen with Donald Trump so many times, is the habitual nature of his criminality, an affirmative defense against each individual charge against him. Yes. Now, I think Ashley's point at the beginning of the first segment about, I know this is what lawyers are saying, that it's a high bar, but what else is the intent? I mean, this isn't a matter of, like, you didn't file things right, or you didn't keep track of things or something like that. What is the explanation for why was he Did he have some people have a thing where they eat paper. It's like a psychological condition. Did he have that? Was he just walking around tearing things up because he had some sort of neurosis or something? No, I mean, he's tearing up documents. What do we think is the intent?
Right.
He doesn't want anybody else to see the document. I mean, there's like no other explanation for that. And, there was I think it was the article in the Post that, broke the main part of this story. They quoted some unnamed people from Trump's circle where they said, he wasn't trying to do anything wrong. This is just what he had picked up from being a private businessman, that he was used to destroying documents. Well, that's not really a great defense. And, there was, some of us will remember, back in the 70s, there were these urban legends, child raised by wolves, right? Not never acculturated to human ways. So they're a little off, right? And we've seen this with the Trump family, not just Donald Trump, but his kids. Like, they weren't raised with the law. You can't expect law abiding since they were raised as criminals.
Yes, and this is
it's almost like it's a disability they have or something like that.
And this is the defense time and time again. It's the combination of the brazenness and the fact that, like, you can't expect him to have known what he was doing was criminal. But again, to me, we have lots of evidence of guilty conscience here. And that's what I think is so important. And it's important to me about a lot of the stuff we've learned, right? The destruction of documents is one part of it, George, but also, like, when he wants DHS to seize the machines, that he sends Rudy to go do it. Like, there's something there. That is someone who understands what he's doing is exactly what it looks like. And there's enough of that to demonstrate that the man he has a guilty conscience because he's guilty. He knows what he's doing, George.
Yeah, he doesn't care about the law. He doesn't care about the rules, but he also doesn't want to get caught.
Yes.
And that's the thing about it. That's why you take the documents up to the residence, maybe, and that's why you flush them down the toilet up there. Because if you rip them up in the Oval Office and leave them on the Resolute desk, some functionary is going to come in and take the pieces and try to tape them back together. And that goes back to the point that you're making, which is, and the point that Josh is making, is that, again, the intent is to destroy the document.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the only intent that's required. And the fact that he kept doing it, and there can be no question that people in the White House counsel's office had to have told him,
of course,
you're not supposed to do that, Mr. President. And he had to have known they're collecting the trash and taping the stuff together. And if he's doing it some other way so that they don't tape it together, well, there's something going on there, and at a minimum needs to be investigated.
Well,
and fairly well.
And in terms of the bar too, Josh, I mean, we can't forget. This was a national pageant drama around Hillary Clinton's deletion of emails that involved the head of the FBI coming out and making an enormous announcement about whether criminal trials would proceed, and then making another announcement later when a new batch of emails came up, probably that tipped the election. So the idea that, it's just one of these things. It's like, it wasn't just one of those things back in 2016. I was there, I remember.
Yeah, I almost hate if we're, reducing it to, what was the standard with Hillary? Look, I mean, that was always, even at the worst possible interpretation of that, just totally different. If we go back, the Presidential Records Act is a post-Watergate law, because before this, there was some open question, like, who owns the records? Maybe they're the president's personal property. So Congress went on record and say, no. They belong to the American people. It is inconceivable that this law ever would have envisioned it was okay for the president to be chronically tearing up documents.
Correct.
It is impossible that would be allowed.
Yeah.
People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times. Sinks, showers, and toilets. We won't talk about toilets. Trump with the toilets. People have to flush their toilet 15 times. Toilets 10 times, right? 10 times. Wow, Bob, not me, of course, not me.
While President Trump was in office, staff in the White House residence periodically discovered wads of printed paper clogging a toilet in the White House residence. Most believe the president had been flushing documents.
Keep your eyes open if you see any shenanigans, which you probably will. If you see people like dumping things, flushing things.